Before we get into this today, folks, if you don't mind, I've got a favour to ask. If you do enjoy the content that we've been putting out, available to the internet for free for around 5 years now on a weekly basis, if you can press a like, follow, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can be informed when this content goes live. We've produced more than 250 special presentations from those across the anomalous space, seasoned researchers, veteran enthusiasts, and academics. And they are available here for free for you. But they do take a lot of time and a lot of organisation to put together and to bring forward to be made available. So look, if you like this content, we do too. We think that more people should see it. And that requires a little bit of your help. So if you can press that like, subscribe, follow, and press notification bell, it's greatly, greatly appreciated.
So OBEs, I think that there's a spectrum between OBEs and lucid dreams, and there's some in the middle where you might not know what experience it is, especially if it's during the sleep cycle. And I've had a lot of those experiences where I'm like just suddenly in this experience and I'm thinking, is this an OBE or a lucid dream? But then if you think there seems to be, so not in that spectrum, but on either side, there seems to be a different sort of phenomenology of either of them. And if you look at, say, OBEs that happen not from the sleep cycle, but from a waking state or from like a near-death experience or fainting or whatever, or just suddenly as you're walking down the street, it happens to some people, they tend to have different features than the lucid dreams that happen especially during the last REM cycle before you wake up, which are the ones that we tend to remember. And some of those features there tends to be less characters or entities in the OBE than in REM dreams. And not always, but generally, the environment seems to be more stable in the OBE and less fantastical. There seems to be, in REM dreams, including lucid dreams, there tends to be more symbolic content or something that you can interpret in a kind of psychological sense. Or you might say like, oh, I dreamt this and this and this all together because I watched a movie with that element in last night. And then 2 days ago, I talked to my friend and we talked about this element. And so it's cobbled together. Whereas the OBE tends to be more like waking life. And sometimes you don't even know that you're in an OBE until something grabs your attention and you're like, hold on a minute, or you turn back and you see your body or something like that. And also in lucid dreams, most people, but not all, will say that they can, with their mind or their emotions, they can change things. They can change the characters or the environment. And that's very rare in OBEs. Like if you're in an experience that you don't like, the way of kind of changing that isn't to change the scenario, but to exit from it. So to navigate, you can use emotional regulation or intention to move into another place, like go out the window or sometimes something really shocking happens and then you just like without
Is that what you would call disassociation?
Dissociation can cause OBEs, but there's a lot of other things that can cause OBEs as well. It's not necessarily like OBEs, there's sort of a dissociation or detachment from emotions, but it's sort of different from dissociation as described by psychiatrists. And also dissociation tends to be with dissociation, like in a psychiatric sense, there tends to be sort of a detachment from the body, but in a different way from an OBE. So there's been a study done by Jason Braithwaite, and he showed that people with OBEs, they tend to have a very strong body image or body schema. So there's like the rubber hand illusion. It's more rare for people who have OBEs to actually have that illusion because they have a very strong embodiment. They're very strongly embodied. And people with dissociation are kind of the opposite. They don't have that strong sense of embodiment.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Obviously, we don't want to distract away from your talk because I'm guessing you probably cover quite a bit of this in it.
No, not really, actually. So it's good extra questions.
We like it.
Okay.
Maybe we should adopt this. We should have like an introductory conversation before we have a presentation.
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. So, shall we? Shall I read your profile then? Is that probably the best way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
I'm aware that your schema of introduction is very large, so I made a quick summary actually. So,
Oh yeah, go for it.
so Samantha Lee Treasure is a British-Canadian researcher, author, and lifelong OBE researcher, currently based in South Korea. Raised on a haunted Ontario farm, she earned a BSc in Social Sciences and MA in Medical Anthropology in London. Focuses her thesis on fieldwork across cross-cultural OBEs. She has interviewed hundreds of experiencers, shamans, and contactees worldwide, exploring the intersections of sleep paralysis, dreams, tech, and evolving astral entities. She is a Anthony Peake protege, and her 2025 book, Out of Body Experiences, synthesizes anthropology, parapsychology, and neurology. Hailed as groundbreaking, she lectures globally, destigmatizes OBEs, and predicts their cultural and digital evolution. And she currently is seeking to bridge the gap between science and spirituality. Would that sound about right?
That's very long.
You should have seen the original one. I got it down to 2 paragraphs.
Where did you get that?
I asked Grok. Okay, so when you feel ready, feel free to share your presentation to us and talk us through that. We'll go mute for the time being, so we don't interrupt or cough over your presentation or whatever. And then we'll join you back on the other side, if that's okay. So when you feel comfortable, step up to the green room, as it were, and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Hello, everybody. Apologies that I'm not there live for the talk, but it is currently 4 a.m. in South Korea, so I'll be sleeping or astral projecting at this moment. However, I will be waking up and joining you, anyone that's still around, for the FAQ after. So I'm going to talk about OBEs and how it relates to the paranormal, which is one of my favorite topics of all. So the term out-of-body experience was coined by G.N.M. Tyrrell in his book Apparitions in 1943. And he did this in part to introduce a new way of looking at this phenomenon, mainly to avoid the mystical connotations of astral projection, which was laden with a lot of like cosmologies and, different levels, and it was getting a little bit biased, and there's a bit of dogma around astral projection. So he wanted to look at it with fresh eyes and a fresh new term. But he wanted to look at it in a sober light with science, but also he didn't shy away from looking at the stranger aspects of the OBE. And he noted, as did some other parapsychologists from the 19th century to the 20th century, that it seems to be associated with apparitions. So one of the things that he talked about was that sometimes people who are dying or have just passed away are seen by the living, and these apparitions are called wraiths. And sometimes this person had no idea this person was in any trouble. They might have been in another country, and there are tons and tons of these cases called crisis apparitions as well, which were especially popular in the 19th century. So he also talked about the case of Dr. Wiltse, who was a physician in Kansas in the 1800s. And I'll just read about what Dr. Wiltse reported. So he had typhoid, and he had no perceptible pulse for, I think it was like 4 hours or something like that. So also keep in mind some of these features that I talk about, like the bluishness, the invisibility, the clarity and stability of the environment. Dr. Wiltse reported that he felt and heard the snapping of small cords, which seemed to be linked to his body, before feeling himself emerge from his skull. As he emerged, his new form appeared to him as like a jellyfish in both shape and color. He continued, I floated up and down and laterally, like a soap bubble attached to the bowl of a pipe, until I at last broke loose from the body and fell lightly to the floor, where I slowly rose and expanded into the full stature of a man. I seemed to be translucent, of a bluish cast, and perfectly naked. He walked to the door and noticed that he was now suddenly wearing clothes. He was further shocked when his elbow went right through a man physically standing in the doorway. Dr. Wiltse tried to attract the attention of his friends, but realizing that he was invisible to them, he gave up and walked outside into the street. He was surprised by how clear everything looked to him, and he remarked on the redness of the soil and of the washes the rain had made. He then noticed the thin cord protruding from his shoulders, which he likened to a spider's web, which stretched into the house and presumably to his physical body. So before he could do anything else, there seemed to be a pair of invisible hands that propelled him, and he ended up somewhere completely different on a road with a mountain, and he walked around for a little while before a black cloud descended on him, and then he was suddenly back in his body. So people like GNM Tyrrell realized that these sort of near-death, out-of-body experiences sounded awfully similar to what it might feel like to actually be a ghost. So there's these reports of people seeing apparitions, and then reports of people kind of being apparitions at the same time. But, of course, you don't have to be dead or dying to have these experiences, to be an apparition or to be seen as an apparition. Shirley MacLaine, the Hollywood actress, she wrote a book called Out on a Limb, which is about her spiritual journey, including her first out-of-body experience, which happened in a jacuzzi on a trip to Latin America. And I'll play a little clip from this. So parapsychologist Celia Green, in her book Out of the Body Experiences, she describes OBEs as being realer than dreams and even realer than waking life for a lot of people. So Shirley MacLaine talked about seeing this kind of aura around, I guess, biological beings, her friend, the plants, which, to be honest, I've never come across. Seeing an aura in that way, like around plants and things like that, out of body. But she also talks about seeing this silver cord, which is attached from her physical body to her astral body, and then going up and up and up and up, getting a bird's eye view of her body, and Earth, and going into space, which is sometimes also described by some people. Okay, whoops. Okay, so when does the out-of-body experience happen, besides when you're in a jacuzzi? It can happen when you're awake, when you're unconscious, under anesthesia, from sleep, from dreams, from sleep paralysis. So basically from any state. It tends to happen in between states, like in between sleep cycles, in between dreams and waking up, or in between sleep paralysis and waking up. Triggers for it are also varied. So there's sensory deprivation, meditation, taking psychedelics or other substances, bodily harm, or emotional shock, and the list goes on. So what is actually happening during out-of-body experience? The psychological model of OBEs kind of elegantly ties together all of these various triggers and conditions into one theory. So the brain, especially the temporoparietal junction, or the TPJ, it's integrating all of the live physical senses into both a model of the live physical world and something that's called a body schema, which is the brain's map of the body and body parts and how it relates to that physical space. So it allows us, the body schema allows us to like be in the physical world. It's our avatar. And it allows us to be able to automatically know how far and how quickly to go and reach for something, reach for an apple or a baseball or something like that. And so people like Susan Blackmore and Harvey Irwin, the real OGs of out-of-body experience research, they suggested that whenever something happens to interrupt this process of creating this live body schema and live map of the physical real world, we snap into a backup model, which is cobbled together from our memories. It's more of a top-down process rather than, so from our memories and imagination or pattern recognition, rather than bottom-up from the live senses. And this could be why OBEs tend to feel so real and so stable, because it is actually a backup copy of the immediate environment. And our mind, so not our eyes or these kinds of things, our mind is actually refining the senses and presenting the world to us. And as neuroscientist Anil Seth says, we're actually hallucinating all the time. It's just that when we agree about the hallucination, we call that reality. So if we were to see the world as our eyes only allow us to see it, everything would be very grainy. It would be very low resolution. But there are parts of our brain that refine these visions for us. So if you think of it like that, you realize that we don't actually have a direct interface with the physical world as we think we do. There are all these different layers of it. So the OBE is only switching into this backup model of the live senses. So how I would think of it is kind of like if you go to a website and the internet is running perfectly fine, and your computer, when you go on the internet site, your computer is storing in cache files the logo, the text, the images. So the next time you go onto that website, even if there's no internet or it's patchy or just the Wi-Fi is completely off, your computer can still present that website to you, but just made from the cache files. It's not actually the live website that you're looking at. So that is what the psychological model says is what's happening with OBEs. So there's also theories about why this might be beneficial to us, evolutionarily speaking. One of the features of OBEs tends to be emotional distance. So even if something terrible is happening to the physical body, the person they might feel sympathy for it, but they feel an emotional detachment, generally. They also tend to have a clearer mind than when they're awake or out of body experience. And they tend to have a bird's eye view of the situation, or at least a different perspective than the physical body. So how this could be beneficial, evolutionary speaking, is it could provide us with an exit plan. So, for example, looking at this photo, maybe I could see, maybe if instead of going over the fence, maybe I could slip through the building, and that's like my closest exit. Or if something is happening to the body and you can't exit, you can't run away or fight back or anything, at least leaving the body can protect your mental health. So it buffers you from that trauma and the memory of being in the body. So that all sounds very rational and reasonable, right? So you can say maybe we've explained out-of-body experiences through science. But there's also a lot of weird things that happen once you're in the OBE. So one of the other things that parapsychologists in the past have talked about was sometimes people see apparitions of people who are alive, not dead or dying. And sometimes those people have no idea that they're being seen by their friend or they're being seen in another country. They might say that nothing special was happening at the time to them. So instead of being called a wraith, like a crisis apparition, somebody who's dead or dying and seen as an apparition, these apparitions of the living are called doppelgangers or double, or in Japan they're called ikiryo. And Cornell Hart was an American sociologist in the 50s. He called this ESP projection, and he collected reports of people who said that they could astral project to someone, sometimes be seen by those people, and sometimes bring back verified information. Sometimes the people who said they saw these apparitions would report them as seeing them as if they were really there, like just like you're seeing me now, not translucent or weird or anything. Sometimes they reported as seeing like shadow figures or wisps of smoke, or they might start as a shadow and then become like a realistic person. Robert Monroe, who started the Monroe Institute in Virginia, he was a famous OBE author from back in the 60s. And he describes trying to project himself into his friend's kitchen. And then he went and checked with his friend, and his friend said around that time he was in the kitchen and he saw what looked like kind of, I think he said it was like almost like a silky, shadowy kind of wispy thing appear. And in the 70s, an American medium called Alex Tennis, he, from when he was a child, he had a lot of strange anomalous experiences, starting with when he had an accident with scalding water, and that seemed to be the trigger for everything. So not long after that, he saw a doppelganger of himself, and he said that it became like a play friend to him. And as an adult, his friend in Canada said that suddenly Alex showed up at his house. So they sat there chatting for a while, and then Alex left. But then the friend thought, that's weird. I don't hear his car leaving. I don't hear the car on the gravel. And he was waiting, and there was nothing there. There was no car. And so he went to talk to his wife. She was upstairs the whole time, and she said, I heard both of you speaking. And he checked with Alex, and Alex said that he was in New York the whole time. So there's a lot of these cases, and I'm not sure, but it tends to happen with people who astral project. I recently went to Siberia last year, and I spoke to shamans, and they have a belief that a part of your soul they call it the senezen, it's basically like your ghost, can sort of detach from you and wander around and maybe show itself to people while they're awake or in their dreams. And they might sometimes seem to have different priorities than your actual conscious mind. So I thought that was interesting because it's quite similar to these cases of people from more modern Western backgrounds. And I remember, I couldn't find a source for this, but I always remember seeing this on TV in one of those sort of ghost reenactment shows. It was about a woman who had recurring dreams about a house, and she was like obsessed with this house. She kept going there in her dreams. And then one day, about a year later, she went to go and view a house to buy. And she gets to this one house, and the couple opens the door, and I think it was the wife that was shocked and said, oh my God, you're the woman that I saw. And she reported seeing a ghost in her house, but the ghost was this living woman. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think she ended up living there. So these stories kind of make you question the overlap between apparitions and ghosts and astral projection or OBEs. And these were sometimes called telepathic apparitions. So going back to G.N.M. Tyrrell, he was the sort of British mathematician and parapsychologist who coined the term out-of-body experience. He also developed this stage carpenter model. So he suggested that there was a producer who was either, say, a loved one in distress, maybe an astral projector, and this producer is sending emotional or mental messages out to the receiver, the witness. And this is cobbled together by the witness's, like an internal mechanism that Tyrrell called the stage carpenter. And it's cobbled into this kind of hallucination or apparitional drama. And Tyrrell emphasized that this was a joint effort between the producer and the witness. And this could be why there are veridical experiences too, like telepathic experiences, or seeing something that is in a remote location that you couldn't possibly know because you've never been there physically. Sometimes there are OBE cases or doppelganger cases tied to classic haunting experiences. So, for example, and this doesn't seem to be talked about a lot when people talk about the Enfield Poltergeist case, which happened in Enfield, England in the 1970s, is that, so in Guy Lyon Playfair's book, This House is Haunted, he talks about how there was seemingly an OBE case and a doppelganger case during this haunting. First of all, so Janet would sometimes apparently like jump on her bed and seem to put her into a different state of mind or something. I don't really understand what that did, but right after that happened, there was a bang, and she became very exhausted. She said that, so the neighbor heard all of this and came into the house, and she said, Janet said, I went through the wall into the neighbor's house, into the bedroom, and described what it looked like and everything. She'd never been there before. And Janet said, I'm going to do it again. So the neighbor ran back into the bedroom in the house next door, and she looked, but she didn't see Janet come through the wall, but she did see one of Janet's books on the ground, apparently. So it was kind of like an apport mixed with an OBE report. So that's very strange. They don't go into a lot of detail about that experience, but I thought it was really interesting. And then on another day, so Maurice Gross, he's the man pictured here with Janet. He was the main paranormal investigator on this case. And one day a woman came and knocked on the door, and she reported that Maurice opened the curtain and looked at her and then walked up the stairs. And so she was thinking, why didn't he open the door for me? So she kept knocking, and then the woman of the house comes down, opens the door for her, and the woman says, well, why didn't Maurice open the door for me? I saw him right there. And she said, no, he was upstairs in the bedroom with us the whole time. So these kind of things make me think, too, when we're investigating a paranormal case, maybe we should ask questions of the witnesses or the people in the house to see what kind of dreams they're having, if they're having sleep paralysis or OBEs, or an experience that they can't categorize, maybe something in between. So there are some features that I've noticed crop up in both apparitional cases as well as OBE cases. So sometimes when we see OBEs depicted in film and TV, there's this kind of bluish cast. And this does come up sometimes. I wouldn't say it's in most OBEs. I think it's in a minority of OBEs. But people say that it tends to happen in very meaningful or veridical, like real or telepathic or precognitive OBEs. And I also came across a case of a man in England. So why did it say 1936? I think that was in two different books. I think that's supposed to say 1836, not 1936. So in 1836, this man, Robert, he lived in England, and he got engaged to the love of his life, but he had a problem. He needed money for their future life. So he decided to go to Russia to find his fortune. And he went there for about a year, and he found a good job, and he was in constant communication with his fiancée. And suddenly one day, the letters stopped coming. So he wrote to some family or friends, and he found out that she was very gravely ill and she'd gone to Jersey to rest. So he fell into a depression, and one day he ended up falling asleep on the sofa, and about an hour later he woke up and he saw this kind of bluishness start to permeate the room. And at the foot of the sofa, he sees this sort of shadowy thing like moving around and kind of growing, and then it grew into a form of a woman, and then it was his fiancée. And later, he wrote a letter to her family, and he found out that she passed away on the same day at the same time that he saw her apparition. So there's also another weird thing about OBE entities that the psychological model hasn't yet really grappled with, is the entities, meaning like humans other than humans, seen, felt, heard, positive or negative. And I couldn't really find anything on OBE entities not like a focused study, even though there's a lot of studies on dream characters and sleep paralysis entities, and even apparitions and hallucinations, but not OBE entities, even though OBEs, because of their realism, they can have a hugely profound effect on people's beliefs. So I did my bachelor's dissertation on this, and I found that a lot of OBEs, especially the first ones that people have, they tend to be quite empty. They seem to be a lot less populated than either REM dreams or sleep paralysis episodes. So non-REM dreams, which I won't get into now, but they do have some overlap with OBEs. Non-REM dreams also seem to have a lot less entities or beings than REM dreams. And there are sometimes people and animals. They can sometimes seem to be in their body going about their day, and sometimes out of the body, like as if they're dreaming, or they're kind of walking around like zombies, not really understanding what's going on, or they seem to be, maybe having an astral projection or something, but aware and able to interact with you. And they can see both living people that they know as well as the deceased as well. Cats and spiders, for some reason, crop up a lot more than things like dogs or cows, or cockroaches or whatever. And there's also shadow figures, including shadow spiders. It's a lot rarer, but I've also come across reports of people seeing people like Jesus or mythical figures, like angels or gnomes or sort of water sprites. And then more recently, we're seeing things that really belong on screen and not in our OBEs, or so we think, like Mickey Mouse, even floating screens. And I've even come across an OBE somebody had of Donald Trump, which was interesting. I thought Donald Trump probably belongs in the Mickey Mouse category rather than the people and animals, but just because it seems so like this was somebody who was in England, and it was, very strange. It seemed to have an impact on their political beliefs. So another interesting overlap that I've seen between OBE reports and apparition reports is the description of sound. So in a lot of OBEs, you can hear words or music or noises like bangs or something like that. But a lot of times people also talk about there being a silence, there being no ambient sound. And sometimes they'll even try to speak or scream and no sound comes out. Or they'll see somebody who looks like they're talking, their lips are moving, but there's no sound. It's like watching a film on mute. And this is really interesting because it's similar to the Oz factor that Jenny Randles talks about, which crops up in UFO cases and other strange experiences. So I think maybe this suggests that the person is going into an altered state, which I think is similar to what Jenny Randles was pointing out, that you're going into almost like a different dimension or something like that, whatever that means. I think it means you're going into an altered state. So there was a case from 1980 of a man who was writing his PhD on UFOs. Actually, he was in the library studying, and a man walked up to him and he started a conversation with him. So they talked for a while, and then suddenly the man had this outburst about UFOs, which was really strange. And then he just walked off. So the student was like, he felt like something was really off suddenly, not just about the man, but about everything. And he got up and he started walking around. And he walked around the library and suddenly nobody was there, unlike, just minutes before. There was no staff, there were no patrons, and he thought, he was kind of creeped out by this. So he went back to his workstation and he worked for about another hour, and then he left the library. And as he walked out, this time, suddenly everybody was back. So it sounds almost like one of these empty OBEs. Another thing that I found is really interesting, this doesn't crop up in dreams or sleep paralysis, is the sense of being invisible. So again, it's like you're a ghost. I did an online survey on my website, and collected about, I think, something like 35 responses about invisibility and visibility in OBEs. So some people said things like going to a mall and no one could see me. They look right through me, walk through me, and generally ignore me. Animals cannot see me. But sometimes they can interact. It's just a little bit different than dreams. They talk to me telepathically as if I was talking to their subconscious mind only. A memorable one appeared to be terrified. So I interviewed someone. It was really interesting. So like I said before, sometimes you have empty OBEs. So since she was a kid, up until she was about 21, she had OBEs, but there was nobody in them. She was alone. Sometimes she would feel a presence, or she'd feel like somebody was helping her fly, but she'd never see anyone. So the first time she saw someone, it was a mother and daughter, but they looked absolutely terrified, and they were running away. And they were like properly running on the ground. And she was like floating kind of above them. So she thought, I better go as well if there's something scary going on. But the closer she got to this mother and daughter, the more scared they were. And then she realized they're scared of me. And then she said later on, she had another OBE and she saw herself in the mirror. And she described herself as being headless with wings and with 3 breasts. So I asked her, maybe do you think that the mother and daughter saw something strange like that, but you didn't have a mirror to check at that time? So I've seen myself in a mirror in an OBE maybe 2 or 3 times, and I tend to have darker hair because I normally dye it blonde, but I tend to have like more of my natural color, and I tend to sometimes look a bit younger too, which is nice. But I haven't seen anything like mythological like that before. So that kind of raises the question of what do we actually look like out of body? And again, like I said before, some people who astral project are reportedly seen by those who are living in the body at the time. And they seem to see them as like shadowy figures or whatnot. So it really makes you think about the form that things take. So in time for the season 5 of Stranger Things, this all makes me think, like, are we actually in the Upside Down in an OBE? The Upside Down being a copy of the immediate environment, whether it's your room or the town, whether you're in an arcade, in the show, Will is in an arcade and there's people all around, and then suddenly just like that, everything is blue, everybody is gone. It sounds awfully similar to an empty blue OBE. And it can happen to people like that. It's rare, but it can happen to people when they're just going about their daily life, walking around or doing something repetitive. Although I don't think I've come across a case yet of somebody having an OBE actually during like a video game session. So parapsychologists in Celia Green and Charles McCurry, in their book Apparitions in 1975, they proposed a metaphoric model, metachorio coming from metachorio to go to another place. So they suggested that things like lucid dreams, OBEs, but also apparition cases, these were all metaphoric experiences, meaning that instead of hallucinating one thing, you're like, there's everything's a hallucinated panorama. So like your entire reality is replaced. So John Poynton, who was a parapsychologist, and he was a president of the SPR a few years ago, he said an apparition need not be thought of as located in the observer's physical space at the moment. It may be considered as located in a non-physical space that the observer has entered in a slightly dissociated state. And I think, given the overlap between OBEs and apparitions, I think that is something that's going on. I think that the psychological model explains it to an extent, but there's still a lot that we can explore. So that's the end of my talk. If you want to get in touch, there's my email on my Instagram and my website. We've also just come out with a book a few months ago, and that explores the features of OBEs and how they're approached in different cultures and different subcultures as well in more detail. There's also a chapter on apparitions. I'm coming out with a newsletter soon. It's going to be just monthly, no spam. You can also get in touch with me or go on my website to participate in an OBE entity survey that I'm running with the University of Virginia, Monash University in Australia, and the University of Greenwich. So that's the first study of its kind to finally delve into OBE entities in detail. Or if you just want to say hi and share your experience too, I would love to hear from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. So yeah, if you end sharing your screen so we can see you as we talk, and obviously you're sort of useful on full screen. So, I mean, that was a fascinating deep dive into veridical data, the data of the psychology and so on. But can I ask, I mean, have you had like an experience yourself? What was the trigger for your research, or was it a topic that you came across and then decided to dive into it?
Yes, I've been obsessed with this since I first learned about it when I was 8 years old. So at the time, my younger brother, he was 6 years old. He was sleeping on the sofa. I was playing with toys in the living room, and he just woke up really excited, and he said that he was just outside. And our mom was in the kitchen, and she was like, "You were here, like you didn't go outside. It was just a dream." He goes, No, it wasn't a dream. I was really outside. And he described seeing our neighbor walking over with a cherry cheesecake, which is very detailed. And I remember thinking I'd never even heard of a cherry cheesecake before. And then a couple minutes later, there's a knock on the door, and it's that same neighbor holding a cherry cheesecake. So I remember just standing there in the living room, and my brain was like, so I already thought that there were things like ghosts, and there was sort of a supernatural aspect to reality. But this was like, whoa, like, okay, so we don't have to wait until we're dead, or like, it's not just that simple as, the dead and the living and hauntings and stuff. Like, this is something that we can do. So I thought of it as a kind of X-ray vision. And then I tried to look for books. I didn't have a word for it. I eventually found astral projection, and then I tried to have the experience myself, and I had a couple of experiences here and there, but I didn't start to actually have frequent OBEs until my mid-20s. And then that's when I decided, when I was really having them a lot, I was studying geology, and I remember thinking, I love geology, but why am I studying rocks when I'm having OBEs? Maybe I should be studying OBEs instead.
Do you find that the topic itself, it obviously is so over stigmatized, shall we say, with it being sat in under the paranormal umbrella, that it's not taken seriously despite the depth of evidence?
Yeah, oh yes, for sure, yeah. And I've spoken to some scientists who they stick to the mainstream. They stick to things that can be explained neatly by mainstream science. But then if you talk to them privately, they might be like, but I've had OBEs that were veridical, or kind of like psychic OBEs or shared experiences and things like that. But they don't feel safe enough to like talk about it openly, but they might do some kind of experiments on their own to explore it on their own.
It's very fascinating. I find that's exactly the same with people who have, ghost experiences, particularly poltergeist experiences, those who are engaged in the UAP topic, those who are experiencers. That kind of phenomenology that is happening appears to be replete in all those sectors, yet science, despite acknowledging it exists, refuses to go near it because of the stigma of paranormal overall, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that a big part of the stigma is because, for one thing, it's natural for a lot of people, maybe the majority of people, to want to have the hope that there's an afterlife, or maybe they've lost someone recently. They want to think that they're still around in some way, or they want to have an OBE because they think it's going to be comforting or positive or something like that. And I think it is for most people. But then, so that's not the stigmatizing part. The stigmatizing part is we don't have a way to measure it or prove it yet. So that makes it very easy for certain types of people to capitalize on that. And there's a lot of good books or good talks out there which are grounded and honest and everything, coming from a good place. But then there's some people who they're just all about the money, and I've come across this a lot in OBEs too. I had a chapter about this as well. I could have written an entire book about it, actually. But there's a lot of kind of snake oil like salespeople,
Yeah.
So I think that stigmatizes it a lot.
Yeah, I guess like for those research in the early 1900s, of course, when psychics and mediums were kind of being investigated as a field of science, and they realized that most of them were charlatans. They were debunked very quickly, and it's kind of been left in that position, despite the fact that some of those experiences appear to be quite fantastical. So, I mean, what do you think? Like, is there a percentage of those who are genuinely experiencing stuff to those who want to portray that they are experiencing stuff for kind of monetary value or fame or some kind? Is there a ratio, do you think?
A ratio?
Yeah.
I would say just in my personal, like in my limited experience, say in the OBE space, of people who tend to be like doing workshops and kind of active in the commercial space, maybe like half. I don't know. I should like sit down and make a list. I don't know. Maybe something between 40 to 60% would be like my guess.
Yeah. I kind of the other thought I had is that, and again, it's such a different question to what we just asked, is that, how is the because we're not necessarily talking about afterlife experiences here. We're talking about while they're having life, but also having a sort of ghostly experience. I mean, how is that different culturally in, say, Korea, where you are, where I'm assuming you have more of those reports, to say a Western perspective? Is there a difference cross-culturally, despite the fact the experience being the same? Is it kind of examined culturally differently?
So you mean in what sense? Like,
yeah, so in Korea, they might have a different perspective on what is happening culturally to, say, a westernized view that is viewed culturally. Is there a different perspective there?
Yeah, I found the thing that was really unexpected for me was because, the UK is, in my mind, like it's a very diverse place, and in so many different ways. And then Korea, I mean, everybody says it's like homogenous Korea, blah, blah, blah. But it's not really, actually, like in terms of religion, in terms of like lifestyles and things like that. And all of those things will actually shape how they view the OBE. But also it was like there seems to be more of a diversity in the ways people approach OBEs in Korea than in the UK, which was interesting. Because in the UK, I've seen like sometimes there might be a new religious movement or, something like that, something niche. But generally there's like the people who look at it from a paranormal aspect. And those are the people that they tend to look at the whole spectrum of things, like the positive, the negative, and, and then there's sort of people who are more on the new age side of things, who a lot of times they don't want to look at this sort of paranormal-y, entity, shadowy figure type OBEs. They'll kind of literally filter it out from their spaces, their forums or whatever. So, and then each of those spaces have their own authors and their own films, and they kind of have this cosmology and these beliefs. And when you're talking to people, they might not even know where they got the idea that this entity is this. So you kind of have to ask them, like, why did you think that was like harmful? Or why did you think something like that? And it might be something they heard in a book. It's like there's sort of a culture around it. Whereas in Korea, there isn't like kind of, you can't just Google out of body experience and the same kind of authors come up, and it's very varied. But when I spoke to people who didn't have any kind of spiritual background, just like very regular Korean people, who had no interest in OBEs, but they had OBEs, they would say things like it was a hallucination, because they don't believe in the afterlife or something, or because or they would say it wasn't an OBE because I've seen OBEs on TV and that's something superheroes do and you only see the physical world and you can fly wherever you want, but I wasn't able to go where I wanted to. I was just floating somewhere. And another person I spoke to, she was a very busy entrepreneur and she had an OBE in the middle of the night. And she told her friends, and her friends just said, it's because you're working too much. You need to just stop working so much, take some Korean medicine, just chill out. And so she did that, and she didn't have another experience. But I asked her, did it affect your views on the afterlife or anything? She was like, no, I already assumed. It was the same with the person that thought it was a hallucination. I kind of assumed there might be something, but this isn't the time for that. Right now I've got to focus on work, earning money, eating, enjoying life. I'm not going to think about that. And it's not time to go into an OBE. So there's a lot of people that they might believe that it's possible, but they don't think it's something that we should be doing. There's no point. We're in the body for a reason, sort of thing.
I want to bounce over to Caroline because I feel like I've asked 3 or 4 questions in a row here, but I just want to follow up on that. Is there any kind of unique entities that are Korean Pacific?
Yep.
In OBEs, I'm not sure about OBEs. I can't really recall anything jumping out at me, but for sleep paralysis, I noticed that in the West, there's the shadow figure or the hag, the old hag. And then in Korea, one of the things that crops up a lot is the a young woman with long black hair, sort of like in The Ring.
Yeah.
And they have this belief that, going back years, they have this belief that if a woman dies before getting married and having kids, that was the sort of the purpose of being born as a woman. So if a person dies before that, then they die unsatisfied and they haunt the place that they used to live, or they might find a young man and they want to be close to the young man, that sort of a thing. So that seems to crop up in Korea a lot, which I haven't really found,
interesting,
in UK or whatever.
So throughout my life, I've always watched a lot of anime, a lot of Japanese influence, and then that is quite a complete story there too, isn't it? That the unmarried by 27 lady, she's and then that is a cultural thing, as ladies must get married by age 27. It's really
luckily
not.
Luckily, that's not the case anymore. That's but I guess years ago, yeah.
Caroline, I can see you're waiting with bated breath there. Come and join this conversation. Otherwise, I'm going to take it over.
No, that's fine. You've been doing a good job. Thank you. Thanks, Sam, for the wonderful talk. I just want to touch on a few things that you mentioned during your talk, if that's okay. You mentioned that a lot of your work through the OBEs was dealing with shamanic and shamans. When they experience their out-of-body experiences, was that through drug-induced states, or was that through going into a deep trance type?
So not drug-induced. I have heard that it's maybe more in Central America and South America that they do more drug-induced OBEs, but I haven't really looked too much into that side of the world. But in Siberia, especially in Tuva, which is sort of along the Mongolian border, they talked about having OBEs not drug-induced, but drum-induced. So the drum, doing the drum. And sometimes they would still be drumming, their physical body would still be drumming as they're going out of body. Which is interesting. It just reminds me suddenly of a case that I heard about before of somebody who was typing, and she had an OBE as she was typing, and I think she continued typing. So those kind of things do crop up sometimes where the physical body continues, driving, typing, drumming, as they're also out of body. And also some shamans just have them spontaneously, or it could happen during sleep, or right before sleep, right after sleep as well. Sometimes they can just kind of sit back and put themselves into the trance and then have the OBE like that. But drumming seems to be quite, also one shaman told me that there are secrets that are passed down. And she was like, don't ask us about our secrets. Those kinds of things. Like, I think there are ways that they might, at least some of them might induce OBEs that they don't want other people to know about. But it seems to have something to do with drumming.
That's a very interesting point that you've made, because cross-culturally, if we take that drumming, obviously we have that in the spiritual retreats that people would go to here, the drum sessions to help induce calm and stillness. My husband is a psychotherapist, and he uses, when he did used to do hypnotherapy, he used to give people relaxation tapes, and sometimes they'd have like a binaural beat. And he was saying when he wanted to induce some type of hypnosis reaction, there are certain frequencies that you can, if on a binaural beat, that it would have a dual purpose, maybe, for example, 14 in the difference between the frequencies. Yeah. Is that something that the shamans mentioned to you, that they had to be at a certain frequency to help to induce this?
No, but so an anthropologist called Michael Winkleman, he talks about this. So he said that he's done a lot of work with shamans and altered states, and he said that the drumming will actually put somebody into a theta brainwave state, and the theta brainwave state is used in binaural beats as well. So that's interesting. Yeah,
incredible. And I know that he would use a different type of frequency for a different reaction, treating a different issue kind of thing. But he's the expert on that. This is just what I've gleaned from the conversation. But that's interesting to think about the drumming that they would use. Thank you for that. Moving on to another couple of things that you'd mentioned. So first of all, we're talking about telepathic apparitions. Have you ever heard of an American chap called Keith Linder from the Bothell Hell House?
Oh, yes, I have. Yeah,
there is a part in his book, or his the stuff that he tells us, his stories, that mentions about having a telepathic apparition and seeing this woman he didn't recognize on his hallway, and she looked through the doorway, she turned sideways, and she walked out through the wall. And later he managed to identify exactly the same as you did with the lady who came to visit the house. She was somebody who'd lived in the house previously, and she was still alive.
Very strange.
You might like to have a chat. Quite happy to put you in contact with him.
I would love to. Yeah, thank you.
He's very open, and he's written about it in lots of his books, this telepathic apparition. So I think it might be something that you could help each other with.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the last thing that I picked up, when you were talking about the types of OBEs that people have witnessed, you mentioned a floating screen.
Yeah.
Now that screamed to me of the Doddelson case in England. Have you ever heard of the Doddelson case?
Oh, that's the one with the messages coming up on the computer that seem to be coming from someone hundreds of years before.
That's correct, yeah.
Right? That's correct. Now, if you look at the information that was given, the person who was in the past said that, how are you receiving the messages that we send to you in response from, our present time back in time? And he said, I see a floating screen. The words just come up.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Wow.
Also, there's an episode of Skinwalker Ranch series. There's another series that runs alongside it called Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, where there's a reporter and a CIA agent. Basically, they go around to other locations in the US that also have locations that are very similar to the experiences at Skinwalker Ranch. And one particular farm actually has that on a regular basis, where a screen appears to open in a field, where people see information appear. And it appears that it's a rectangle that appears on a particular field where strange kilohertz frequencies are being recognized. In fact, I'm sure I have the episode. If you like, I'll send a link to you.
Yeah, yes, please. Interesting. Okay, I have to look into all of these.
It's quite weird, because sometimes I have very, very intrinsic links and things that happen that are quite anomalous with other people. And I sit and I think, I'm in the Truman Show. So
Yeah,
having
it's strange.
that people have witnessed, are we in a Truman Show? Are we the ones that's the entertainment for another person looking in? Who knows? But
I feel like the more you go down this rabbit hole, the weirder it gets. Because you can kind of say like, oh, OBEs, there's a psychological model. Oh, it's very reasonable, And then, oh, but what about this? What about that? And then like things like synchronicities as well. That's when, for me, that's when things get really, really weird. When you start to really question reality. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last thing for me was, what was the percentage that you said that anybody having OBEs experienced having a disconnection from feelings and emotions? Was that everybody who's managed to?
I can't recall like a percentage, but it just seems it's very common it's very, very commonly reported of having this feeling of emotional detachment and calmness and like mental clarity altogether.
Because it's something for me, OBEs is not something that I specifically know a huge amount about. I've been involved in talks before and I've read a few books, but I've never noticed anybody mentioning having that disconnection of the emotional attachment. I've never noticed anyone saying that. So I'm guessing through your experience of investigating the topic, this is something that's been quite widely known.
Yes, I think that Celia Green talks about it in her book, Out of the Body Experiences. I can't think off the top of my head of other books that talk about it too much. But yeah, I think there's been a few academic papers on it as well that mention that. But I don't know if anyone's actually like looked into it specifically as a focus with the OBE.
Yeah. It's very unusual. You have such well-reported documentation going back as far as you did to the 1800s as well. So I suppose that this has helped to evaluate and give it quantitative and qualitative effects for you to be able to deal with. Have you found that it's helped?
Yeah, and there's something about, I feel like people writing, so the parapsychologists writing in the 1800s and the early 1900s, there's something about the way that they think that I really resonate with as well. Like, they seem quite open-minded. They seem like they really want to know, like they're happy to look at apparitions and OBEs, crisis apparitions, and all these different things quite openly and see connections. And there's also, it sounds like there was a lot of working together as well. Maybe I'm wrong, I just didn't get the gossip from back then. But I feel like sort of on this side of history, there's a lot of siloing and there's a lot of sometimes ego as well, with people saying my way is the right way and that sort of thing. I mean, of course, that's not everyone, but it's there. And yeah, I like reading the older stuff, and it reminds me of when I was a kid and I was just really curious about all this, and I just wanted to know what it's all about,
Do you think that they were particularly open because of the spiritual movement rising, and it was their parlor games and their fun to have all these spiritual connections with like gatherings? It would be their entertainment on an evening, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think that gatherings as well is a big part of it too. Thinking about it, like nowadays we're always on our devices, right? And I don't know, like especially in the last few years, there's not a lot of in-person meetups, and people are so busy now. Like back then, sometimes I would read reports from back then and it's like, I was at my sister's house today, and then, 3 of my siblings came to visit. And then it's like looking at reports from back then, you notice how close family and friends were and community was, even in places like London. And so I think there was a lot more discussion about these things. I think people just weren't as harried, maybe. and not like watching TV and
yeah.
There was probably more community and more discussions about this stuff.
Thank you very much. I've actually seen Christian find what he needed to online now. So, Christian, did you have any more questions? Because I am aware that Sam is going to join us in a minute, because this is now Thursday night.
Oh, yeah. Time travel.
So this is about 8:30, not 8:30. Yeah, 8:30 on Thursday. So Sam will be joining us in a couple of minutes to answer some questions live. So, Christian, did you have anything else before we go and speak to Sam direct?
Okay, maybe it should be the question should be centered around time loops, because I'm aware that you are Anthony Pink's student, as it were, to some aspects, and he talks about time loops. Are OBEs potentially, are we reliving past lives or future glimpses? Any thoughts on that as we're going to be doing a bit of time travel?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you'll have an OBE, you'll try to see something in the next room, and you see something that's not actually there at the time. Sometimes you'll have an experience and see what is actually there. It could be in another country. So I'll give you a very brief experience that happened to me back in 2017. So I was in a haunted location somewhere in the west of England, and we set up an OBE experiment in the middle of the night. So there was a paranormal team, doing their thing, holding vigils in the middle of the night. Then on the other side, there was me, doing the OBE experiment. So they set up CCTV motion detectors in the room next to mine, just to prove, if I did see anything, they could prove that, me and nobody else looked in the room to see what the object was that they placed in there, right? And so they put an object on the chair in the middle of the room, and I was supposed to go out of body and go and see what was there. So despite being very hungover that day because I had a work due the night before, I was able to go out of body, which was really unexpected to me. But I went to the next room. I saw the chair in the middle of the room, but I saw a couple of different things on the chair. So the thing that was most vivid was a walkie-talkie. Then when I talked to them in the morning, they said that they actually placed, I think it was a lighter or something like that. But while they were setting up for maybe 4 or 5 hours, they did put their walkie-talkie on the chair in the middle of the room. So it's almost like, well, did I see a glimpse of what was there in the past? I also saw another object, which I'd never seen before, and I drew it. And one of the guys was a climber, and he said it was a line cutter. And he showed me a picture of it. I was like, yeah, that's it. And he goes, well, there's a lot of rock climbing around here, so somebody probably had a line cutter in the room at some point, maybe. So yeah, things like that made me think, well, yeah, what's the nature of OBEs in relation to time? How does that work?
No, I'm absolutely out of questions my end, but obviously we've got members of the audience who've been typing furiously away while Sam's been giving her talk. So I think we should nip over there and I can read out a few of the questions for Sam, and we're going to time travel now. So is this where our screens go? Come on, Christian, join in. Join in.
I could do that.
Okay.
Now you can step up to become a full-fledged ASSAP member. It costs £20 a year. Well, that's less than £2 a month, basically. For that, you get physical magazines that come through your door, and we just released one very, very recently. But something tangible to hold, to read, to engage with. Conversations that happen weekly on a Thursday. We have a very active social media platform. We're available on X, on Facebook. You can engage with us, talk with our guests, our presenters, our hosts, and those involved with the serious side of the paranormal. Taking the strange seriously. That's what ASSAP gets up to. Not only that, we also do training, we do events, conferences, and much, much more. And you can find out these and all those details on assap.ac.uk. Come and join us.